The massive Galactic Empire warship Dominion's Pride drifted silently through the asteroid field near the human colony of New Montana. Captain Zektar, a towering reptilian officer with golden scales, stood on the bridge studying the tactical display. His yellow eyes narrowed as he examined the readings from their long-range sensors. "Sir, we're detecting unauthorized military activity on the planet's surface," reported Lieutenant Vexana, her blue tentacles dancing over the control console. "The humans appear to be conducting some kind of training exercise." Zektar's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the recycled air of the bridge. The Galactic Empire had strict laws about military activities in contested sectors. Humans were still considered a primitive species, barely 50 years into interstellar travel. Their inclusion in the Empire was more of a courtesy than recognition of any real capability. "What kind of training?" Zektar asked, his voice a low growl that made the bridge crew shift nervously. "Long-range weapons practice, sir. Our scanners show they're using projectile weapons instead of proper energy weapons. Very primitive stuff." Zektar allowed himself a small smile. Projectile weapons were laughably outdated. The Empire had moved beyond such crude technology centuries ago. Energy weapons were faster, more accurate, and had virtually unlimited ammunition when properly powered. Only the most backward species still relied on hurling bits of metal at their enemies. "How many humans are involved in this exercise?" he asked. "Our count shows approximately 50 individuals, sir. They appear to be spread across a wide area, practicing individual marksmanship rather than proper formation fighting." The captain nodded slowly. This was perfect. The Empire needed to remind these humans of their place in the galactic order. Recent reports suggested that human colonies were becoming too independent, too confident. Some had even refused to pay their tribute taxes, claiming they could defend themselves. "Prepare a landing force," Zektar ordered. "We'll arrest these soldiers and bring them aboard for questioning. Let's show these primitives what happens when they violate Imperial military regulations." "Sir, shouldn't we contact the human colonial government first?" Standard protocol is for civilized species," Zektar interrupted. "These humans need to learn respect. We'll handle this as a police action." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. Within an hour, 3 Imperial dropships were loaded with a full company of Galactic Marines. Each Marine stood nearly 8 feet tall, their power armor gleaming with energy shields and built-in weapon systems. They carried plasma rifles that could melt through steel and had enough firepower to level a small building. Zektar joined the landing force personally. He wanted to see the look on these human faces when they realized they were dealing with a superior species. The dropships descended through New Montana's atmosphere, their stealth systems making them nearly invisible to primitive sensors. The planet below was typical of human colonies, mostly wilderness with scattered settlements connected by rough roads. The humans seemed to prefer spreading out rather than building proper cities, another sign of their primitive nature in Zektar's opinion. "Target area coming into view, sir," reported the pilot. Through the viewports, they could see a vast valley surrounded by rocky hills. Long-range scanners had detected the human training exercise somewhere in this area. "I don't see any humans," observed Commander Dracoth, Zektar's second-in-command. "Our sensors showed 50 individuals. Where are they?" Zektar studied the terrain below. Rolling hills covered with sparse vegetation, scattered boulders, and a few lonely trees. Perfect hiding spots for primitive humans playing soldier. They're probably hiding. Humans are known for their cowardice. "Deploy the troops in standard search formation. We'll flush them out." The 3 dropships landed in the center of the valley, their engines kicking up clouds of dust. The Imperial Marines disembarked quickly, their heavy boots thudding against the rocky ground. Each squad spread out in a textbook pattern covering all possible escape routes. "Attention, primitive humans." Zektar's voice boomed across the valley through his armor's external speakers. "You are in violation of Galactic Empire military regulations. Surrender immediately and you will be treated according to Imperial law." Silence answered him. The wind whistled through the rocks, carrying the scent of the planet's alien vegetation. Zektar waited exactly 60 seconds, then signaled his troops to begin the search. The Marines moved with mechanical precision, checking every boulder and depression. Their advanced sensors could detect a heartbeat from hundreds of meters away. It should have been simple to locate 50 humans in this relatively small area, but after 30 minutes of searching, they had found nothing. "Sir, this is strange. reported squad leader Thanecore. Our pre-landing scans clearly showed humans in this area. Current scans show no life signs except local wildlife. Zektar felt a prickle of unease. His species had evolved from apex predators and his instincts were rarely wrong. Something felt off about this situation. The humans should have been easy to find. They were using primitive equipment and had no advanced training. Expand the search pattern, he ordered. Check the surrounding hills. Maybe they scattered when they detected our approach. The Marines began climbing the rocky slopes, their power armor easily handling the rough terrain. Zektar remained in the valley with his command squad, monitoring their progress through his tactical display. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint that his enhanced hearing almost missed it, a sharp crack that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. One of his Marines on the eastern hill suddenly stopped moving. Squad 7. Report, Zektar commanded. No response. Squad leader Thanecore. Check on Marine Vexith immediately. Thanecore bounded up the slope toward his fallen comrade. As he reached the motionless figure, another crack echoed across the valley. Thanecore collapsed. All units, we are under attack. Zektar roared into his communicator. Take defensive positions immediately! But there was nowhere to hide. The Marines were scattered across open ground, their bright armor making them perfect targets against the rocky landscape. More of those strange cracks followed and more Marines fell. Zektar's tactical display showed red icons spreading across his formation. In less than 2 minutes, he had lost a quarter of his force to an enemy he couldn't even see. Return fire, he commanded. Saturate the hills with plasma. The remaining Marines opened up with their energy weapons, sending brilliant bolts of superheated gas into the rocks. The barrage lit up the valley like a deadly fireworks display, melting stone and setting vegetation ablaze. But the invisible attackers continued their methodical destruction of his force. Each shot was impossibly precise, finding gaps in power armor that shouldn't have existed. These weren't the crude projectile weapons his sensors had detected. These were something else entirely. Zektar was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. The humans weren't primitive soldiers playing at war. They were something far more dangerous. Staff Sergeant Jake Mitchell lay perfectly still behind a cluster of rocks 1,200 meters from the valley floor. His ghillie suit made him invisible against the natural backdrop, while his Barrett M82A1 rifle rested steady on its bipod. Through his scope, he watched the alien Marines stumble around like confused children. Cowboy 1 to all stations. He whispered into his throat mic. Targets are spread across the valley. Count 40+ hostiles in power armor. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. These lizards just declared war on American soil. A chorus of quiet acknowledgments came back through his earpiece, scattered across the hills around the valley. 49 other American snipers were settling into positions their alien visitors would never expect. Jake had been conducting a training exercise with members of the 1st Special Forces Group when the alien ships appeared. They'd been practicing extreme long-range shooting, pushing the limits of their equipment and skills. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Looks like Christmas came early, boys, muttered Sergeant First Class Maria Santos from her position on the western ridge. These idiots just landed in a shooting gallery. Jake smiled grimly as he tracked one of the larger aliens through his scope. The creature stood in the center of the valley, obviously the commander. Its armor was more elaborate than the others, covered in what looked like rank insignia. Alpha Team, take the flankers, Jake ordered. Bravo Team, work from east to west. Charlie Team, you're on overwatch. Delta Team, save the commander for last. I want him to watch his whole unit get taken apart. The alien commander was broadcasting something through external speakers, demanding surrender. Jake could see the arrogance in the creature's posture, the way it stood completely exposed in the open. These aliens had never faced a real threat before. 2 minutes until party time, Jake announced. Remember your training. 1 shot, 1 kill. Displacement after every shot. Make these bastards think they're fighting ghosts. Through his scope, Jake could see individual aliens climbing the hills, their armor glinting in the afternoon sun. They moved in predictable patterns, following standard search protocols that any military academy would teach. Professional but not creative. Cowboy 7 has a shot, came the voice of Sergeant Tim Rodriguez. Eastern slope, lone target, clear backdrop. Take it, Jake confirmed. The crack of Rodriguez's rifle echoed across the valley. In his scope, Jake watched one of the climbing aliens suddenly stop moving. The others paused, confused by what had happened to their comrade. Displacement, Cowboy 7, Jake ordered. Rodriguez would already be moving to his secondary position, invisible among the rocks. The alien commander was shouting orders now, directing another soldier to check on the fallen Marine. Jake tracked the second alien as it bounded up the slope with surprising speed. Cowboy 12, you're up. Another rifle cracked. The second alien dropped like a stone. Now the aliens understood they were under attack. The commander's voice boomed across the valley, ordering defensive positions. But there was nowhere to hide on the open slopes. The aliens had walked into a perfect kill zone. All cowboy stations weapons free, Jake commanded. Light them up. The valley erupted in chaos. Rifle shots echoed from every direction as 49 snipers opened fire simultaneously. The aliens' advanced sensors were useless against enemies they couldn't see, using weapons they didn't understand. Jake lined up his shot on an alien trying to take cover behind a boulder. The creature's power armor looked impressive, but Jake had learned something important during the first few kills. The armor had cooling vents and joint gaps that were vulnerable to precision fire. He squeezed the trigger. The 50 caliber bullet streaked across the valley at over 2,800 feet per second. Punching through the alien's armor like it was paper, the creature spun and fell, bright blue fluid spraying from the wound. Displacement, Jake muttered to himself, already sliding backward from his position. By the time return fire arrived, he was 30 meters away and setting up his next shot. The aliens were firing back now, their energy weapons turning rocks to molten slag and setting the sparse vegetation ablaze. But they were shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on empty positions while the real threats moved unseen through the terrain. Cowboy 4 is down, came a voice over the radio. Took a direct hit from a plasma rifle. Position is compromised, Jake felt a surge of anger. That was Corporal Davis, a kid from Montana who'd joined the army to see the galaxy. Now these alien bastards had killed him on his home planet. Copy, Cowboy 4, Jake replied, his voice steady despite his rage. All stations increase rate of fire. Make them pay for that. The shooting intensified. Jake's team had trained for scenarios like this, fighting against superior technology with primitive weapons. They'd studied every aspect of asymmetric warfare, learning how to turn their enemies' advantages against them. The aliens' power armor made them overconfident. Their energy weapons were powerful but had limited range compared to chemical projectile weapons. Most importantly, they fought like a conventional military force, which made them predictable. Cowboy leader, this is Cowboy 6, came the voice of Master Sergeant Patricia Wong. I've got eyes on their dropships. Should I disable them? Jake considered the tactical situation. 3 alien dropships sat in the center of the valley, their crews probably monitoring the battle from inside. If he let the aliens retreat, they'd report back to their superiors and bring reinforcements. But if he trapped them here, he could send a different kind of message. Negative, Cowboy 6, let them keep their ride. I want survivors to tell this story. Through his scope, Jake could see the alien commander had taken cover behind one of the dropships. The creature was gesturing frantically, probably calling for support or trying to coordinate its scattered forces. Cowboy 8, can you put a round near the commander? Close enough to get his attention, but don't kill him yet. Copy that, Cowboy leader. A rifle shot rang out and a chunk of alien dropship hull exploded just meters from the commander. The creature dove for better cover, its composure finally cracking. All stations begin psychological phase, Jake ordered. Single shots, random intervals. Keep them pinned, but don't finish them yet. I want them to think about what's happening here. The sustained gunfire stopped, replaced by sporadic shots that seemed to come from impossible angles. The aliens huddled behind whatever cover they could find, their tactical formation completely broken. Jake could see them trying to use their sensors to locate the shooters, but human snipers had been playing this game for centuries. They knew how to defeat technology with fieldcraft and patience. Sir, we've got movement on the northern ridge, reported Sergeant Santos. Looks like some of them are trying to flank us. Let them come, Jake replied. Team Charlie, shift to secondary positions. Give our guests a warm welcome when they arrive. The battle had been going on for 20 minutes and Jake's force had suffered only one casualty, while destroying most of the alien unit. These creatures had never faced an enemy that could strike from extreme range without being detected. They were learning that there was a big difference between primitive technology and primitive tactics, and the lesson was far from over. Captain Zektar crouched behind the landing strut of his dropship, his golden scales now dulled with dust and fear. Around him, the remnants of his Marine company huddled in whatever cover they could find. In 30 minutes of combat, he had lost more than half his force to an enemy he still couldn't see. "Commander Dracoth, report," he hissed into his communicator. Static answered him for several seconds before his second-in-command's voice crackled through, strained with pain. "Sir, I'm pinned down behind the eastern dropship. Lost 3 more Marines trying to reach your position. These humans are using some kind of advanced cloaking technology." Zektar's throat sac vibrated with frustration. Advanced cloaking technology was impossible. The Empire's intelligence reports clearly stated that humans barely understood basic energy manipulation. They were supposed to be primitives with crude weapons and no military discipline. Another rifle shot echoed across the valley, and Marine Kethvar's scream cut across the radio. The young soldier had been trying to reach a better defensive position when something punched through his armor like it was made of cloth. "Medical team to grid 77 Alpha," Zektar shouted, but he already knew it was useless. Every medic in his unit was either dead or pinned down under fire. The humans seemed to know exactly where each of his Marines was positioned. "Sir, this is Pilot Officer Nalthor," came a new voice over the communications channel. "I'm monitoring this engagement from Dropship 2. I'm seeing some very unusual readings on my sensors." "What kind of readings?" Zektar demanded. "Sir, the humans aren't using energy weapons at all. My sensors are detecting chemical projectiles fired from extreme range. Ranges that should be impossible for primitive ballistic weapons." Zektar felt his blood run cold. Chemical projectiles meant kinetic energy weapons, the kind of crude technology that civilized species had abandoned centuries ago. But if these weapons were striking from impossible ranges with perfect accuracy, then everything the Empire knew about human capabilities was wrong. "How extreme are we talking about, Pilot?" "Sir, some of these shots are coming from over 1,500 meters away. Our plasma rifles have an effective range of 800 meters. These humans are engaging us from distances where we can't even shoot back." The tactical implications hit Zektar like a physical blow. His Marines were trapped in a kill zone, being picked off by enemies they couldn't reach with their own weapons. Worse, the humans seemed to be toying with them, taking careful shots instead of finishing the job quickly. "All units fall back to the dropships," he ordered. "Prepare for immediate extraction." "Sir, we can't abandon our mission," protested Commander Dracoth. "The Empire expects us to arrest these humans for military violations. The Empire expects us to be alive to file our report." Zektar snapped. "These aren't random colonists playing soldier. This is a professional military force using tactics we've never encountered." As if summoned by his words, another shot rang out. This time the bullet struck the landing strut just centimeters from Zektar's head, spraying him with metal fragments. The message was clear. The humans could have killed him at any time. "Pilot, start the engines," Zektar commanded. "All Marines fighting withdrawal to extraction point." The surviving members of his force began moving toward the dropships, using their remaining cover to mask their retreat. But the humans weren't making it easy. Rifle shots continued to harass them, each bullet precisely placed to wound rather than kill. Zektar realized with growing horror that the humans were deliberately keeping his Marines alive. They wanted survivors to tell this story. "Sir, we're detecting new contacts," reported the pilot. "Multiple human vehicles approaching from the south. Estimate arrival in 10 minutes. Through his tactical display, Zektar could see the approaching signatures. Primitive wheeled vehicles, probably carrying reinforcements. His depleted force couldn't handle a larger engagement. "How many vehicles?" he asked. "6 confirmed, sir. Estimated 20 to 30 additional humans." Zektar made a command decision that would haunt him for the rest of his career. "All units, full retreat. Leave the wounded if necessary. We extract immediately." The surviving Marines sprinted for the dropships as their pilots fired up the engines. Energy weapons discharged wildly in all directions, more for psychological effect than any hope of hitting the invisible snipers. As Zektar reached the ramp of his dropship, he paused to look back at the battlefield. Scattered across the valley floor and rocky slopes were the bodies of his Marines, the elite soldiers of the Galactic Empire. They had been outfought by humans using technology that was supposedly obsolete. "Sir, we need to go now," shouted the pilot. "I'm detecting targeting sensors locked onto our position." The 3 dropships lifted off in a cloud of dust and desperation. As they climbed toward the safety of space, Zektar stared down at the valley where his military career had just ended. Some of his Marines were still alive down there, wounded and captured by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. "Pilot, get me a secure channel to the Dominion's Pride," he ordered. "Priority Alpha communication with Imperial Command." "Sir, shouldn't we attempt a rescue operation for the wounded?" asked Commander Dracoth. Zektar looked at his second-in-command with eyes that had aged a decade in the past hour. "With what forces? We just lost 70% of our unit to 50 humans with primitive weapons. If we go back down there, they'll kill us all." The flight back to their mothership passed in tense silence. Zektar used the time to review the battle footage from his Marines' helmet cameras, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The humans had used the terrain like it was part of their own bodies. They appeared and disappeared like spirits, striking from positions that should have been impossible to reach undetected. Most disturbing of all, their marksmanship was beyond anything in Imperial combat records. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface," reported the communications officer. "It's on an open channel directed at our ship." "Put it through," Zektar said, dreading what he was about to hear. A human voice filled the dropship's cabin, speaking in accented Galactic standard. "This is Staff Sergeant Mitchell of the United States Army, 1st Special Forces Group. We are holding 14 of your Marines as prisoners of war. They will be treated according to the Geneva Convention, which your database should have on file." Zektar's claws dug into his command chair. The human was speaking with the casual confidence of someone who had just won a decisive victory. "We suggest you inform your superiors that the sovereign territory of New Montana is defended by professional soldiers, not primitive colonists. Any future violations of our airspace will be met with appropriate force." The transmission ended, leaving Zektar staring at his tactical display. 14 prisoners. 14 elite Imperial Marines in the hands of humans who had just rewritten everything the Empire thought it knew about warfare. "Sir, what do we tell command?" asked Dracoth. Zektar closed his eyes and tried to find words for a report that would sound like complete fiction to anyone who hadn't lived through it. "We tell them the truth," he said finally. "We tell them that humanity is not what we thought it was." The dropship docked with the Dominion's Pride, carrying the survivors of a battle that would change the course of galactic history. In the medical bay, wounded Marines whispered about ghosts who could kill from impossible distances. And in the depths of space, Imperial Command was about to receive a report that would shake the foundations of everything they believed about their newest subjects. Admiral Thexmara stood before the holographic display in the command center of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion, her forearms crossed in disbelief. The massive insectoid officer had served the Galactic Empire for over 2 centuries, commanding fleets that had conquered entire star systems. She had never read a battle report quite like this one. "You're telling me that 50 humans defeated a full Marine company using primitive projectile weapons?" She clicked in her native language, her mandibles chattering with agitation. Captain Zektar stood at attention, his golden scales pale from stress and humiliation. Behind him, the surviving members of his command staff looked equally shaken. "Yes, Admiral. The engagement lasted approximately 45 minutes. We suffered 68% casualties and lost 14 Marines as prisoners. And these humans were using, what did you call them? Chemical propellant weapons?" "Yes, ma'am. Single-shot kinetic projectiles fired from extreme range. Our intelligence report severely underestimated human military capabilities." Admiral Thexmara's compound eyes studied the tactical recordings from the battle. Each frame showed her Marines being systematically eliminated by an enemy they couldn't see or effectively fight back against. It was like watching professional soldiers being hunted by invisible predators. "Intelligence Coordinator Yithalan," she commanded, turning to a pale, spider-like creature at a nearby console. "What do our files say about human military doctrine?" The coordinator's 8 legs danced across holographic displays as he accessed the relevant databases. "Admiral, according to our assessments, humans employ primitive kinetic weapons due to their limited understanding of energy manipulation. Their military forces are considered poorly trained militia with minimal combat effectiveness." "Then explain this massacre," Admiral Thexmara snapped, gesturing at the battle footage. "I cannot, Admiral. The data clearly shows humans achieving accuracy rates that should be impossible with their level of technology. Some of these shots were taken from distances exceeding 2,000 meters." Admiral Thexmara felt a chill run through her exoskeleton. 2,000 meters was beyond the effective range of most Imperial weapons. If humans could routinely engage targets at such distances, it represented a fundamental shift in tactical planning. Captain Zektar, I want you to describe exactly what happened down there. Leave out nothing. For the next hour, Zektar recounted the disaster in painful detail. The Admiral listened with growing unease as he described humans who seemed to appear and disappear at will, weapons that could penetrate Imperial armor with ease, and tactics that suggested a level of military sophistication the Empire had never encountered. The most disturbing aspect. Admiral, was there restraint? Zektar concluded. They could have killed my entire force in the first few minutes. Instead, they chose to demonstrate their capabilities while keeping most of us alive to witness it. Psychological warfare, observed strategic analyst Kex Thule, a tall, gray-skinned humanoid with large black eyes. They wanted survivors to report back to us. This wasn't just a military engagement, it was a message. Admiral Thexmara nodded slowly. She had seen similar tactics used by other species during the Empire's expansion, but never executed with such precision. What message do you think they were sending, analyst? That our assessment of human capabilities is catastrophically wrong, Admiral. They're showing us that they can defeat our forces using supposedly primitive technology. It's a demonstration of tactical superiority disguised as technological inferiority. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. The Galactic Empire had built its expansion strategy on the assumption that superior technology automatically translated to military dominance. The idea that a primitive species could overcome that advantage through skill and tactics alone was disturbing. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from New Montana, reported Communications Officer Delvara. It's directed specifically at this vessel. Put it through. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the image of a human male wearing strange camouflaged clothing. His face was marked with streaks of dirt and paint, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. This is Colonel James Harrison, commanding officer of New Montana Defense Force, the human said in perfect galactic standard. I understand you're the senior Imperial officer in this system. Admiral Thexmara stepped forward, her massive frame dwarfing the human's image. I am Admiral Thexmara, commanding the 3rd Imperial Fleet. You are holding 14 Imperial Marines in violation of galactic law. The human's expression didn't change. Admiral, those Marines were taken prisoner during an unprovoked assault on sovereign human territory. They will be treated as prisoners of war according to established conventions. Sovereign territory? Admiral Thexmara's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans are subjects of the Galactic Empire. You have no sovereign territory. That's where you're wrong, Admiral. Colonel Harrison replied calmly. New Montana declared independence from Imperial rule 6 months ago. We transmitted the declaration to Imperial headquarters on Centris Prime. Perhaps it got lost in your bureaucracy. Admiral Thexmara felt her confidence wavering. She gestured for her intelligence coordinator to check the records. After a few moments, Yathalan's expression darkened. Admiral, there is indeed a formal declaration of independence in our files. It was classified as a non-priority communication and never forwarded to military command. You see, Admiral, the human continued, we understand Imperial law better than you might think. According to Section 47C of the Imperial Charter, any species may petition for independence if they can demonstrate the ability to defend their territory against external threats. Admiral Thexmara's compound eyes focused on the human with new interest. And you believe today's engagement qualifies as such a demonstration? I believe your captain can provide an accurate assessment of our defensive capabilities. We've also recorded the entire engagement for submission to the Imperial Review Board. The Admiral looked at Zektar, who nodded grimly. The humans had not only defeated an Imperial force, they had documented it for legal purposes. This was not a primitive species acting on instinct. This was a calculated political and military maneuver. What are your terms for the release of our Marines? Admiral Thexmara asked. Simple. Formal recognition of New Montana's independence and withdrawal of all Imperial forces from our system. In return, your Marines will be released unharmed, and we'll provide you with medical supplies for the wounded. And if we refuse? Colonel Harrison's expression hardened slightly. Then your Marines remain our guests while we submit our independence petition, along with evidence of Imperial aggression to the review board. I suspect the outcome will be the same, but it might take a few years to process. Admiral Thexmara realized she was trapped in a perfectly constructed legal and military snare. The humans had lured Imperial forces into attacking them, documented their ability to defend themselves, and now held both prisoners and legal precedent. I need time to consult with Imperial Command, she said finally. Of course, Admiral, but I should mention that we're tracking several other Imperial vessels moving toward this system. I hope they're not planning to attempt a rescue operation. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Admiral Thexmara stared at the empty holographic display, trying to process what had just happened. Admiral, whispered strategic analyst Kexthul, if this gets out, every species in the Empire will know that humans defeated us. It could spark independence movements across dozens of worlds. Admiral Thexmara nodded slowly. The humans hadn't just won a military engagement. They had potentially ignited a galactic revolution. Get me a secure channel to Imperial Command, she ordered. Priority Alpha 1. Tell them we have a situation that could reshape the entire Empire. As her communications officer worked to establish the connection, Admiral Thexmara studied the tactical data from the battle one more time. Somewhere in those recordings was the key to understanding how 50 humans had just changed the course of galactic history. The Imperial Council chamber on Centris Prime had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but rarely had its crystalline walls contained such tense silence. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Galactic Empire 3 millennia ago, sat at the head of the massive circular table reviewing Admiral Thexmara's report for the third time. Around him, representatives from the Empire's 12 founding species shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The holographic battle footage played on repeat in the center of the chamber, showing Imperial Marines being systematically destroyed by an invisible enemy. This is impossible, declared General Karnas, his cybernetic implants whirring as he processed the tactical data. No primitive species has ever demonstrated this level of military competence. The humans must have received outside assistance. From whom? Asked Minister Yelandra, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns. Our intelligence networks monitor all advanced species. No one has been providing military aid to human colonies. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak raised one of his many appendages for silence. At nearly 4,000 years old, he had personally overseen the expansion of the Empire across half the galaxy. He had seen species attempt to resist Imperial rule before, but never with such devastating effectiveness. The issue is not whether this engagement actually occurred, he said in his ancient, gravelly voice. The recordings are authentic, verified by our best analysts. The question is how we respond to it. We crush them, growled War Marshal Dexmach, his massive frame crackling with barely contained energy. Deploy a full battle fleet and reduce their colonies to ash. Make an example that will discourage other rebellions. And validate their claim that the Empire uses excessive force against peaceful colonists, countered diplomatic coordinator Silthera. They've already submitted their independence petition along with evidence of unprovoked Imperial aggression. If we escalate further, we'll hand them a legal victory. Chancellor Vorthak studied the faces around the table. The Empire's strength had always been based on the assumption that advanced technology made them invincible. But these humans had shattered that assumption using weapons that predated interstellar travel. Admiral Thexmara, he said, activating the holographic communicator. You've had time to analyze the engagement. What is your professional assessment of human military capabilities? The Admiral's image materialized above the table, her insectoid features grave with concern. Chancellor, in my 2 centuries of service, I have never encountered tactics like these. The humans use the terrain, weather, and our own assumptions against us with precision that suggests extensive military experience. But they're using primitive projectile weapons, insisted General Karnas. How can such crude technology be effective against Imperial armor? Sir, the effectiveness of a weapon depends on how it's employed, Admiral Thexmara replied. These humans achieved precision that our energy weapons cannot match at extreme range. They struck weak points in our armor that our own engineers didn't know existed. Intelligence Director Kexval, a pale creature with oversized cranium, leaned forward in his chair. Chancellor, I've been reviewing our historical files on human military conflicts. What we're seeing is consistent with their species development pattern. Explain. Chancellor Vorthak commanded. Humans have been engaged in continuous warfare for their entire recorded history. Unlike most species that achieved interstellar travel, they never experienced a period of peaceful unification. Their military technology evolved through constant conflict between their own subspecies. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Most civilized species had unified their homeworlds before developing space travel, leading to relatively peaceful expansion into the galaxy. The idea of a species that had weaponized everything throughout their evolution was disturbing. "Are you suggesting that humans are naturally more violent than other species?" asked Minister Yelandra. "Not more violent," Director Kexval replied. "More experienced. Our records show they've fought wars continuously for over 5,000 years. They've developed military sciences that we never needed to create." War Marshal Dexmock scoffed. "Experience means nothing against superior technology. One Imperial dreadnought could sterilize their entire planet, and could it?" Chancellor Vorthak mused. "Admiral, if these human tactics are as effective as they appear, what would happen if we deployed a larger force?" Admiral Thexmara was quiet for a long moment before responding. "Chancellor, if they can make 50 soldiers invisible to our sensors and deadly at impossible ranges, what could they do with 50,000? Or 50 million? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The Empire's military doctrine was based on technological superiority and overwhelming firepower. If humans could negate both advantages, the entire foundation of Imperial power was at risk. "There's another factor to consider," added Director Kexval. "Our psychological profile suggests that humans respond to threats by becoming more dangerous, not less. Historical data shows that external pressure tends to unite their factions rather than divide them." "What are you recommending?" Chancellor Vorthak asked. "That we seriously consider their independence petition. If we escalate this conflict, we risk turning one rebellious colony into a species-wide uprising. And based on what we've seen, that could be catastrophic." General Karnas slammed his cybernetic fist on the table. "You're talking about surrendering to primitives. If we grant human independence, every species in the Empire will demand the same treatment." "Perhaps they should," said a new voice from the chamber's entrance. All heads turned to see Professor Zalketha, the Empire's leading xenobiologist, entering the chamber. The ancient scholar moved slowly on her mechanical support frame, but her mind remained sharp after 6 centuries of studying alien species. "Professor, you weren't summoned to this session," General Karnas protested. "The fate of the Empire concerns all citizens," she replied, settling into an empty chair. "And I have information relevant to this discussion." Chancellor Vorthak gestured for her to continue. Professor Zalketha had advised the Empire on countless first contact situations. Her insights had prevented several disastrous conflicts in the past. "I've been studying the Human Independence Declaration," she began. "It's not a simple demand for autonomy. It's a philosophical statement about the nature of governance and individual rights." "Meaning what?" asked Minister Yelandra. "Meaning that humans don't just want to be left alone. They want to fundamentally change how the Empire operates. Their declaration specifically mentions extending independence to any species that desires it." The chamber erupted in agitated clicks, growls, and electronic harmonics as the council members realized the full scope of the threat. This wasn't just about one rebellious colony. The humans were proposing to dismantle the Empire itself. "They're trying to start a revolution," War Marshal Dexmock snarled. "All the more reason to crush them immediately." "With what forces?" Professor Zalketha asked calmly. "Admiral, how many Marines would you need to guarantee victory against human defenders?" Admiral Thexmara looked uncomfortable. "Professor, based on what I've observed, I'm not certain any conventional force would be sufficient. These humans fight like they were born for war." "Because they were," Professor Zalketha confirmed. "Unlike every other species in the Empire, humans evolved as persistence predators. They're designed by evolution to hunt prey over vast distances using intelligence, stamina, and tools. War is simply an extension of their hunting instincts." Chancellor Vorthak felt the weight of 3 millennia pressing down on him. The Empire had conquered the galaxy through technological superiority and careful diplomacy. Now they faced a species that rendered both advantages meaningless. "What do you recommend, Professor?" he asked. "Negotiate," she said simply. "The humans have demonstrated they can defend themselves, and they've presented a legal path forward. Fighting them will only prove their point about imperial aggression. And if other species follow their example, Professor Zalkeitha's expression was grave. Then perhaps it's time for the Empire to evolve or face extinction. The humans have shown us that our assumptions about power and control may be fundamentally flawed. The chamber fell silent again as the council members contemplated the end of the only galactic order they had ever known. Outside the crystalline walls, 1 trillion beings went about their daily lives, unaware that their entire civilization might be changing forever. Chancellor Vorthak made the hardest decision of his long life. "Send a message to Admiral Thex Mara," he commanded. "Begin negotiations with the humans." Colonel James Harrison stood on the observation deck of New Montana's hastily constructed orbital station, watching Imperial ships maneuver in the distance. 3 weeks had passed since the engagement in the valley, and the galaxy was holding its breath. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see the massive form of the Eternal Dominion, maintaining a respectful distance from human space. "Colonel, we're receiving another transmission from Admiral Thex Mara," reported Lieutenant Sarah Chen from the communications console. "She's requesting permission to send a diplomatic shuttle to the station." Harrison nodded without taking his eyes off the Imperial fleet. What had started as a training exercise had evolved into the most important diplomatic negotiation in human history. The captured Imperial Marines were being treated well in the station's detention facility, but their presence served as a constant reminder of how quickly everything could change. "Grant permission, but remind them that any hostile action will be met with immediate retaliation," he replied, "and make sure our friends in the hills are still in position." Lieutenant Chen smiled slightly. Even she didn't know exactly how many human snipers were concealed throughout the system, positioned on asteroids, moons, and hidden bases. The Empire's sensors had detected some of them, but Harrison suspected they had no idea of the true scope of human defensive preparations. "Sir, we're also receiving communications from 17 other human colonies," Chen continued. "They're all requesting copies of our Independence Declaration and tactical data from the engagement." Harrison felt a mix of pride and concern. Word of New Montana's victory had spread throughout human space faster than Imperial sensors could contain it. Colonies that had submitted to Imperial rule for decades were suddenly reconsidering their options. "Forward the declarations, but encrypt the tactical data," he ordered. "Each colony needs to make its own decision about independence, but if they choose to fight, they should at least know what they're getting into." The communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Harrison recognized the encryption signature immediately. "Patch it through to my private office," he said, leaving the observation deck. In the small, cramped office that served as his command center, Harrison activated the secure holographic display. The image that materialized was of General Patricia Morrison, the commanding officer of all human military forces. "Jim, you've started quite a mess out there," General Morrison said without preamble. Her weathered face showed the strain of coordinating humanity's response to the crisis. "Ma'am, we were conducting routine training when the Empire attacked us. Everything that followed was defensive action within our legal rights." "I know that, Colonel. I also know that your defensive action has the Empire's leadership scared enough to authorize formal negotiations. That's either very good or very bad for the human race." Harrison understood her concern. If negotiations failed, humanity would face the full wrath of a galactic empire with resources beyond imagination. But if they succeeded, it would mark the beginning of a new era for human independence. "What's the situation on Earth?" he asked. "Complicated. The civilian government is split between those who want to negotiate and those who think we should submit before the Empire decides to make an example of us. The military is unanimously behind your actions, but we're outnumbered by politicians who've never seen real combat." Harrison nodded grimly. Earth's government had grown comfortable with Imperial rule, accepting the protection and trade benefits it provided. The idea of challenging such a vast empire seemed insane to those who had never faced down an alien invasion force. "Ma'am, respectfully, those politicians have never seen what we're capable of when we fight for our homes. The Empire has been expanding for millennia, but they've never faced a species like us. That's what worries me, Jim. We're about to find out if human ingenuity can overcome impossible odds, or if we're about to extinct ourselves through overconfidence. The secure channel terminated, leaving Harrison alone with his thoughts. Through his office window, he could see the lights of New Montana's settlements scattered across the planet's surface. Each light represented families who had trusted him to protect them from forces beyond their understanding. "Colonel, the Imperial shuttle is requesting docking clearance," Lieutenant Chen announced over the intercom. "They're transmitting diplomatic credentials and requesting a meeting with you personally." Harrison straightened his uniform and checked his sidearm. The next few hours would determine whether humanity's future lay in freedom or subjugation. "Clear them for docking bay 2. Full honor guard, but keep our security teams ready. And Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir?" "Make sure our guests see the memorial wall on their way to the conference room." The memorial wall displayed the names and photos of every human who had died defending the colonies from various threats over the past 50 years. It served as a reminder that humanity had been fighting for survival long before they encountered the Galactic Empire. An hour later, Harrison stood in the station's main conference room facing Admiral Thexamara and her diplomatic entourage. The massive insectoid officer seemed smaller somehow, her earlier arrogance replaced by cautious respect. "Admiral, welcome to New Montana Station," Harrison said formally. "I trust your Marines are being treated well?" "They are, Colonel. Your medical staff has been adequate in their care." Admiral Thexamara's mandibles clicked nervously. "I'm here to discuss terms for their release and the broader implications of recent events." Harrison gestured to chairs that had been specially modified to accommodate non-human physiology. The Empire had learned to adapt furniture for hundreds of species, but they had never needed to accommodate human diplomatic requirements before. "The terms remain the same, Admiral. Recognition of New Montana's independence and withdrawal of Imperial forces from our system in exchange for the release of your personnel. Colonel, you must understand the precedent this would set. If we grant independence to one human colony, others will demand the same treatment." "That's their right," Harrison replied calmly. "According to your own Imperial charter, any species capable of defending their territory may petition for independence." Admiral Thexamara leaned back in her chair, her compound eyes studying the human commander. "You've clearly studied our laws extensively, but legal technicalities aside, you're asking us to fundamentally alter the structure of the Empire." "No, Admiral. We're asking you to honor your own principles. The Empire claims to bring order and prosperity to the galaxy. If that's true, then independent human worlds should pose no threat to that mission, unless they inspire other species to seek independence as well." Harrison smiled slightly. "Admiral, if other species prefer independence to Imperial rule, perhaps the Empire should ask itself why." The discussion continued for hours, with both sides carefully exploring the boundaries of what was possible. Admiral Thexamara presented the Empire's concerns about setting precedents and maintaining galactic stability. Harrison countered with legal arguments and moral principles that made Imperial objections sound increasingly hollow. Finally, Admiral Thexamara asked the question that had been underlying the entire negotiation. "Colonel, what makes you think humanity can survive as independent worlds? The galaxy is a dangerous place, filled with species that make the Empire look benevolent." Harrison's expression hardened. "Admiral, we've been surviving in dangerous places for our entire history. We didn't become apex predators on our homeworld by avoiding conflict. We became apex predators by winning it." The conference room fell silent as the implications of his words sank in. For the first time, Admiral Thexamara truly understood what the Empire was dealing with. They weren't negotiating with another client species seeking better terms. They were negotiating with predators who had just realized they were stronger than their captors. 6 months after the Battle of New Montana, as historians would later call it, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. Admiral Thexamara stood in the same conference room where she had first negotiated with Colonel Harrison, but now she wore the insignia of the newly formed Galactic Cooperation Council rather than the Imperial fleet. The transformation had been remarkable in its speed and scope. Within weeks of New Montana's formal recognition as an independent world, 17 other human colonies had successfully petitioned for independence. More surprisingly, 43 non-human species had followed suit, citing the human precedent in their own legal challenges to Imperial rule. "Admiral, the quarterly reports are ready for your review," announced her aide. a young human named David Park who had transferred from New Montana's diplomatic corps. The irony wasn't lost on her that her most competent staff member was from the species that had shattered her previous worldview. Thank you, David. Any major incidents this quarter? 3 minor territorial disputes resolved through mediation, 1 trade disagreement settled by arbitration, and no military conflicts requiring intervention. The independent worlds are actually more stable than they were under Imperial rule. Admiral Thexmara nodded, reviewing the data with satisfaction. The doom and gloom predictions about galactic chaos without Imperial control had proven largely unfounded. Most species, it turned out, were quite capable of governing themselves when given the opportunity. What about the former Imperial core worlds? She asked. They're adapting well to the new federal structure. The old Imperial Council has been transformed into a coordinating body for mutual defense and trade standardization. Chancellor Vorthak seems to be embracing his new role as an elder statesman, rather than absolute ruler. The transformation of the Empire into the Cooperation Council had been surprisingly smooth, mostly because the alternative was complete collapse. Once human independence proved successful, the floodgates had opened. Rather than fight a losing battle against dozens of liberation movements, the Imperial leadership had chosen to reform. Any word from the frontier surveys? Admiral Thexmara inquired. David's expression grew more serious. That's where things get interesting, Admiral. The human exploration fleets have made contact with 3 previously unknown species in the past month. All 3 encounters were peaceful, and 2 of the species have already requested membership in the Cooperation Council. This was perhaps the most remarkable development of all. Under Imperial rule, first contact situations had typically involved conquest or subjugation. The humans approached new species as potential partners rather than subjects, and the results spoke for themselves. What makes human diplomacy so effective? Admiral Thexmara asked, genuinely curious. David considered the question carefully. I think it's because we assume other species are our equals unless proven otherwise. The Empire assumed other species were subjects unless they proved they deserved better treatment. The communication console chimed with an incoming priority message. Admiral Thexmara recognized the encryption signature as coming from the Deep Space Monitoring Station at the galaxy's edge. Put it through, she ordered. The holographic display materialized to show Captain Elena Rodriguez, one of the human officers assigned to the early warning network. Her expression was tense with excitement and concern. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures at the galactic boundary. Multiple ships, definitely not from any known species in our database. Admiral Thexmara felt a familiar chill. First contact with unknown species had always been a delicate situation. But now they faced it without the overwhelming military superiority the Empire had once possessed. How massive are we talking about, Captain? Admiral, these ships are larger than Imperial dreadnoughts. We count at least 50 vessels, possibly more. They're moving in formation toward the core systems. David leaned forward, studying the tactical display. Any attempts at communication? Negative. They're not responding to standard first contact protocols. But Admiral, there's something else. Our analysis suggests their technology is significantly more advanced than anything in Council space. Admiral Thexmara made a command decision. Captain, maintain observation but do not engage. Transmit all data to Council headquarters and prepare for potential evacuation. The transmission ended, leaving the conference room in tense silence. Admiral Thexmara realized with grim irony that the galaxy's new era of cooperation was about to face its first major test. David, get me a priority channel to all Council member worlds. We need to convene an emergency session. Already on it, Admiral. I'm also contacting the human military commanders. If we're facing a threat this large, we'll need their tactical expertise. Within hours, representatives from across the galaxy were gathered in virtual conference. The emergency session included not just government leaders, but also military commanders, scientists, and diplomats. It was a far cry from the rigid hierarchy of the old empire. Colonel Harrison's image appeared among the assembled representatives, now wearing the stars of a general after his promotion to head of Human Defense Forces. His presence carried weight that went far beyond his official rank. General Harrison, Admiral Thexmara began, we're facing a potential invasion by unknown forces with superior technology. How do you recommend we respond? Harrison studied the tactical data for several minutes before responding. Admiral, The good news is that we're not facing this threat as individual species anymore. The bad news is that conventional military responses probably won't work against such advanced technology. Then what do you suggest? Asked Chancellor Vorthak, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. We do what humans have always done when facing superior forces. We adapt, we improvise, and we turn their advantages against them. Explain, requested War Marshal Dexmock, who had surprisingly embraced the new cooperative approach after witnessing human tactical innovations. These unknown ships are large and powerful, which means they're probably overconfident. They're traveling in formation, which suggests conventional military thinking, and they're not responding to communications, which indicates they see us as primitives not worth talking to. Harrison's expression showed the same calm confidence he had displayed during the original crisis at New Montana. In other words, they're making the same mistakes the Empire made with us. The conference participants exchanged glances as they began to understand his meaning. The approaching fleet might have superior technology, but they were facing a galaxy that had learned to fight smart, rather than fight fair. "What do you need from us, General?" asked Admiral Thexmara. "Time, resources, and trust. Give me 3 months to prepare, and when these invaders arrive, they'll discover that conquering the galaxy isn't as easy as it used to be." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of species committed to a truly cooperative defense plan led by the youngest member of their community. As the emergency session ended, Admiral Thexamara reflected on how much had changed since that day in the valley when 50 human snipers had redefined the balance of power. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest contribution wasn't their military prowess, but their ability to inspire others to fight for something worth defending. The unknown fleet continued its approach toward the galactic core, unaware that they were about to encounter not an empire built on conquest, but a community forged by cooperation and tempered by the tactical genius of a species that had never learned how to surrender. In the depths of space, humanity's greatest test was approaching, but for the first time in their history, they wouldn't face it alone.